Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
Tracie Adams, welcome to the Center of the Universe.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You and I are both from the same part of the world, right?
Yes, we are. Looks like God's country.
Hanover County?
Mm-hmm.
Is Hanover County God's country, or is it more specific than that?
Well, I think it's Hanover County, and I do think that God is definitely more in the western part of the county, but that's my opinion.
That's funny. What specifically, where did you grow up?
Well, funny, I just said God was in the western part, but I originally grew up in the eastern part of the county in Mechanicsville. Till I was probably 10 years old. No, well, yeah, about 10. And then we moved for 1 year to a temporary place while we were building our house out in Montpelier.
Okay.
So,
Montpelier is
yeah.
beautiful.
So then I spent the rest of, my childhood in Montpelier, and I've pretty much been in Hanover all my life.
Yeah, and when you say Western Hanover is this wonderful place, we believe that, but we also just like throwing some shade to the eastern part of the county.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you have to choose sides.
Exactly, you do.
Yeah.
I married a man from that side, and I say all the time, people go, "Oh, well, you guys seem so great together." I'm like, "Yeah, there was that one little bit about how he went to Lee Davis and I went to Patrick Henry, but I forgave him for that." And
Well, back in the day when
yeah,
you and I were in school, and we're about the same age, there were only two high schools in Hanover County.
yeah.
This Atlee and Hanover high things, it's all newfangled stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real rivalry.
Yes. Oh yeah, it was huge. It was a big deal, and that's why I laughed when I say like when I first we were 30, when we met, and he told me he went to Lee Davis, and up until then I was like, I really like this guy, and he said that, and then I went, I'm gonna have to think this through.
And when we say things like that, we're mostly kidding, but not entirely kidding.
Mostly.
Well, how did you and I meet? Do you know the story, or is it better for me to tell the story? I
You
don't
can
know.
tell it. Go right ahead.
I got a text from Wayne Deal, who's in a Bible study group with your husband,
Right.
amongst a few other men. And Wayne has known that I've done this podcast for over 5 years. He's good friends with my dad, and he's never sent me anyone to be on the podcast. You're the first that Wayne has recommended to me.
Such an honor, and shout out to Wayne. So.
I think that's high praise.
Yes,
Right.
I'm really touched by that.
And he read your book and he said, Paul, you have to have her on to talk about her life in general, but also to talk about the book. So which one do you want to talk about first? Your life in general or the book?
You lead the way. I will follow.
When did the book come out?
In April of this year.
Okay. Are you obsessively tracking how it's doing?
I probably should be, but I'm really not because, well, for a couple of reasons. First of all, that wasn't my reason for writing the book. I wasn't like trying to um, become some successful, famous writer or something. Um, the reviews are nice. I've had some really, really good editorial reviews and some personal reviews, but and sales have been, I think, pretty decent for a completely unknown writer like myself. Just all of a sudden putting something out in the market. So I think it's been going pretty well. But to be honest, the other thing was that I wrote a collection of essays, which I just knew going into it that I wasn't writing, I wasn't hitting the pulse point of the
Yeah.
market right now, which the days of memoir, it kind of spiked, and then it's on the decline because the market is flooded with memoir, and specifically the memoir and essay that I write. A lot of people just don't know about it. They aren't aware. They don't know that even exists in the world. And so I didn't expect the book, to fly off the shelves because of that. But the people that have read it are like, "Oh, I love this kind of writing."
Did you write it? You obviously didn't write it to go make $1 million. I think in part you wrote it because you enjoy writing, but was it also cathartic for you?
Very, very much so. You've read the book, so you know that I touch on a lot of very difficult topics like um, childhood abuse, addiction, eating disorder recovery, which has consumed my life for the last 4 years. Um, a lot of really difficult issues in relating to parenthood. Like we adopted a child who just kind of took us on a journey that we weren't necessarily prepared for. And you can feel free to ask me questions about any of those things. I'm open to it, but um, I write about things that aren't easy to write about. I had been talking about some of those things a little bit to some trusted friends and clearly to my treatment team and therapists, but it wasn't until one of my therapists said, it really gave me like an assignment between sessions with her to write the story of one of my most painful memories. And I had talked about it a little bit with her and obviously with my husband and some other people close to me. But when I put that pen to the paper, it was like, game on. It was something completely different. It was so different. And it really, I kind of spiraled, at first when I started trying to write it because, when you tell someone a story, you have a certain way you tell it, we have a reason for, um, the narrative, that the way that we like to tell a story, it does something for us. And so we keep going back to that. We tell the story the same way generally every time. But then when you go to write it down, and I don't mean write it like, something beautiful and lyrical like someone's going to read in a book, but you go to write it, suddenly you find yourself, you're right there again. You're thinking about um the the smell of bacon, frying, or the way that the door creaked when it opened or closed, or the sound of footsteps coming down the hall on hardwood floor. Um, and those things are very they could be, I hate this word, but they're very triggering. It did really, when I started to write that first story and then all the subsequent stories after that, um it did kind of trigger me, and I got a lot worse before I got better.
Mm. After the writing exercise.
Yes, when I started doing that, I started with that first one, and then from there, there were others, and yeah, things got pretty dark, um, pretty ugly. In 2021, it was.
Because you were reliving all these
I
things.
was, I was, and what had happened. I hope it's okay for me to go off on this tangent, but I think I told you when we talked before that what happened in a nutshell was that COVID happened and it wrecked all of our lives in one way or another. Nobody was untouched by that. But the mask mandate suddenly, put me and all of us in a situation where we were, told like, cover our faces. And I had never done that before in my life. I'd never had any reason to. I knew that I was claustrophobic. I was having panic attacks already it not just like in an elevator, although I had many in elevators, but like standing in line at the grocery store, if somebody got too close to me or in front and behind, I would literally just go into a full-blown panic attack.
Because you thought COVID was
Just,
going to be a
well,
problem.
no, 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 no. This was before the wearing the mask. Sorry,
Oh,
I'm not
wow.
being clear.
No, you're
So
fine.
I had been dealing with that.
Oh, so you had
I had
suffered most of your life
I
with
had
that.
been dealing with things like that, and some things were all of a sudden I just would completely just be undone, and I didn't see it coming. I'd be fine, like sitting on a subway, and all these people around me, but then when we got to a connecting point and the doors open and I just saw a few bodies walking toward me, I'd lose it. I would
Mm.
just totally unravel, and I'd have I mean, all of it, the pins and needles in your hands and in your scalp, and the numbness, the tight chest, feeling like I was having a heart attack. So long story short, I hadn't dealt with any of that, and I didn't even try to understand what it was about. It was just kind of one of those, yeah, she's just kind of weird like that. We all know Tracie. No, she's going to take the stairs, not the elevator. But then when COVID hit and I put that mask on my face, that just completely, I mean, it completely unraveled me 100%. Just like it led to, everything that happened in that next year and a half came, started with that putting the mask on my face. The first panic attack from wearing a mask was not even in, outside of Home Depot, sitting there looking at, plants. And, and then from there, it got to the point where I was completely debilitated and I couldn't leave the house and I couldn't function. So all of this sort of led me to, the therapy, the counseling, the eating disorder therapy. It was all sort of
So the eating disorder started 4 5 years ago.
40 some years ago, but I just started dealing with it in
Ah,
2021.
okay.
Yeah, it was my coping mechanism.
Hmm.
It was a really effective coping strategy, which, I know a lot of people that don't. It's a difficult thing to understand eating disorders, and I understand that from an outsider's, perspective. I really do understand that it seems so weird. Like, why would you want to starve yourself, or there's a lot of different eating disorders, but mine was anorexia and involved, me consuming a couple of hundred calories every day for years and years and years and years, and exercise bulimia. So I exercised every day. I had to, whether I was sick, whether we were on vacation.
Was it about body image or you couldn't control it?
It was, what it there, and with anorexia and exercise bulimia, definitely it's about body image, um, but the bottom line is it's not really about food at all. And a lot of people don't understand that about eating disorders. It truly is about control.
Hmm.
It is that um, desperate need to feel like you're feeding that perfectionist, all or nothing, black and white kind of thinking, which it's wired in the brain. I mean, it is definitely, we know now that, there's a genetic component. Um, and certainly, I think the saying is that my therapist would tell me is that genetics loads the gun, and then your environment or culture pulls the trigger.
And then once the trigger's pulled, you're living that life.
You're in it. You are in it. And, for a long time, I didn't even understand what I was in. I didn't realize the conscious choices that I was making, what it really was. But then there did come a point where I did know, but I lived in complete denial about it and deceiving everyone around me. I mean, my life was all about deceiving other people to see what I wanted them to see.
Were you deceiving yourself too, though?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what makes one of the things that makes recovery so difficult is having to unlearn all of that kind of behavior and learn to believe yourself and to trust yourself.
Are you completely on the other side of both of those?
Well, um, early on in my recovery, when I was really, doing so great and just rolling on along, and, they were putting me on the scale that has no numbers on it, it goes to a computer. Through the computer, you never know what you weigh. I thought, oh, I'm doing so great. I have got this, recovery is real. I would be like, recovery is totally possible. Now, I'm realizing I don't think it's never going to be gone. It's never going to be gone. It's part of my life. It's part of who I am. Just like, all of my addictive um, behaviors and, um, the drinking, the drugs, all of it. You could stop doing it, but I don't think you ever really stop thinking about it.
Yeah. I yeah, every addict I've ever talked to, they're like, I'm gonna think about it from time to time. And a good day is I only think about it a handful of times. A bad day is I think about it all the time, and then
Yes.
I use or drink at the end of the day.
I've been sober since November of 24, so not that long.
Yeah,
Um,
but really long relative to what you were living before.
Oh, yeah, because my entire life I have medicated, anesthetized, numbed myself in some sort of way, some way. And most of the time, there were a lot of different ways at one time. I mean, I was addicted to just about every substance that you could name, except for heroin. Never did heroin, but I did struggle with addiction to just about everything else. And, I went through periods of like, okay, I'm giving up the cocaine. I'm not doing that. And then I move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So there was just always something. And when the anorexia really took hold when I was about 19, that gave me something that I could really cling to. It's the weirdest thing about how it works, about how our brains, go haywire like that. But it does something for you. That feeling of that you can control that. And the longer you go without eating, the better you feel. Like my husband, he gets hangry if his breakfast doesn't come like he in fact he eats two breakfasts, first breakfast and second breakfast.
And the second one's with you?
No, no, he just eats his own breakfast, and we laugh about it. Well, I'm like, "Oh, is this second breakfast?" Or and he's like, "Yeah, yeah, this is second." But and so he just doesn't understand. And a lot of people don't, and I understand that they don't understand. I truly do understand that it sounds bizarre. Why would you want to starve yourself, and how could that possibly feel good? But I guess, like, here's something I can't relate to, but like runners, I've never been a runner, but they say like it's an obsession, it's a compulsion, and they get that high from it. And I understand it. I really do. That's exactly what happens with an eating disorder.
I,
You get high.
I we're gonna come back to um, a lot of what you just talked about in the book. I told you a couple weeks ago when we last spoke. I like to think of myself as a very manly guy, even though I'm aging and testosterone's decreasing and estrogen's probably going up. I still consider myself a fairly manly guy. And I think I told you my youngest kid has only seen me cry one time, and that's when we had to put a dog down. Well, at least three times reading your book, and I read it in a day because I couldn't stop turning the pages. I cried at least three times. I think
Mhm.
when you talked about the loss of your child, when you talked about the hospice story with the unnamed, the man who didn't speak and it was within hours of losing his life and didn't have any loved ones around him, but you were there for him. And the moment I cried was when the last few sentences you said to him. And I'm not sure the third time I cried. I probably cried four or five times, maybe. I'm not sure when, but it, it starts very, very sad, your book. It's not in chronological order necessarily,
No.
but I mean, you have themes, you have four themes throughout the book, and they get more positive as you go through, but there's just a lot of sadness in the beginning, and it's all of your sadness. And I felt so sad for you, but I think you're in a much much better place this very moment. But the struggle is still real for you
Yes.
across a lot of dimensions.
Yeah.
So saying all that, and I don't care to get into a lot of detail, but you suffered abuse as a child, and that
Yes.
that had to be where some wiring began to change for you. And you had no concept as a child of what that was doing to you and what the long term impacts might be, I'm guessing.
Mm-mm. No, you don't. That's that when you suffer abuse as a child, or neglect, or, anything is off kilter, you don't know. I mean, you only know that this is your reality. This is the way it is. And I think that's what makes it so destructive, really, in people's lives, because you just internalize, fear and shame, feeling like, well, you know, nobody has to tell me that this is wrong, but there is that place in me where I just inherently know that this is something wrong, and I'm part of it. So therefore, there's something wrong with me. So it definitely, it changes your life. It definitely changes your life. With my adopted son, when we got him when he was 11, and he had been through all types of abuse.
Can we back up
Hmm.
before we talk about he's your oldest
He's
child?
the oldest, yeah.
What? Because I would not have come to this place unless I had real influence from my wife or others around me. Normally, when you adopt, you're finding a kid who's maybe between your kids or maybe the would be the youngest. You ended up adopting a child that was going to be the oldest.
Yeah.
What was the rationale behind that?
Well, it wasn't that we were looking for that at all. And in fact, it was a difficult decision to make, to say yes, because I did really, my husband and I both really struggled with that feeling of kind of taking my oldest son's, my biological son, taking his birthright, like he's been the oldest, and now, that's going to be taken away from him. So he was only 9 at the time.
I still
uh
felt a certain sort of way because I'm the oldest in my family, and I would have that would have affected me.
Yes, yeah, and we talked to him about it, but in hindsight, I look back and I'm like, yeah, they're just there's no amount of talking to a kid to tell them, to make that okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That son, the biological son, who was my firstborn, um, he is he's just one of the kindest, most gentle souls that you would ever meet, and he um he just like was all in. He was like, sure, yeah, like
What a
whatever
great 9-year-old.
yeah, whatever you want to do. He truly was. I mean, you talk about God crying. I could cry thinking about he was the best 9-year-old. He was the best kid. Like, he just and still is, at 30, something, whatever he is. I lose track of them now. But he just yeah, he was like, yeah, sure, okay, if that's what you want to do. Then, the storm came in, and we didn't know. We
You
had
knew you'd have some sort of storm.
well, it's funny, like, I feel it's embarrassing to say this now. It just seems ridiculous. Of course, I should have known that it was going to be a storm, and I certainly didn't think it was going to be easy. But we had been fostering some kids down in the city. My husband and I did a lot of work in the inner city with I had this traveling gym bus thing.
Wow.
Like, yeah,
That
40
sounds
foot.
fun.
It was super fun. A school bus that was converted into like a party bus, with like gymnastics mats and these giant balls you could roll around on and hum at people's heads, and sound systems and all that. And it was amazing. And we took it down into the city. We did ministry with these kids. I mean, the bus would pull up and there would be kids lined up for so many blocks you could not see the end of the line.
Sounds like the world needs a lot more of those buses.
Yes. Well, it was really great. But during that time, we met a lot of families that were in need, and we took some kids into our house. So before we adopted Douglas, we had had another little girl who was she was older than Douglas, actually. She was like 12 when she came to live with us, and almost 14 when she went back to live with her family. I homeschooled her with my other kids. And um and so I don't know. I think we were a bit prideful, a little puffed up, thinking we've got this. Like, we have been doing this. We've been having these kids in and out of our house. I mean, my husband was working with all these young boys and having them over, doing like a sort of like a Royal Rangers or that type of a
Sure.
program, like a Boy Scouts type program with these kids in the city. They had been coming over and camping out, and going down to the river at our property. And so yeah, we just felt like, yeah, we got this. We know what we're doing. And you know pride definitely goes before the fall.
Yeah, you're confident until you're not confident.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we definitely learned the hard way not to ever say we got this again. And don't get me wrong, I love my son Douglas is amazing too. He's a wonderful person, and I absolutely adore him. But he did kind of bring a storm into our life, and we weren't ready.
Well, how long had he lived with you before you adopted?
Um, he didn't. And that's the other thing.
Oh boy,
Yeah.
super confident.
Yeah. Well, what happened was, we did, we just said we wanted to adopt a child. Were of like mind. My husband and I set out to do this. And we went through the whole process with United Methodist Family Services is who we went through. They kind of like certified us, did our home visit. A lot of people don't know what people go through when they adopt children, especially domestic adoptions, which there are hundreds and hundreds, thousands of kids out there like Douglas that are waiting for someone, to give them a chance. And people are busy going overseas to get these little babies,
And there are a lot of 9-year-olds here.
Yes, and there are a lot of older kids here that desperately need a family. And so we knew that we were doing a domestic adoption. And that's really all we knew. We were like, we're open to anything, like anything. But I mean, we felt like, the Lord's gonna lead us in this, like which direction to go. They did social services called us about like some little twins that were like 2 years old, and that just did not feel right. We were like, yeah, that's not it. And we just really kind of waited on the Lord to lead us. I won't go into all that now because that's a long story, but we did feel when we got Douglas's file, which was, I mean, like 6 inches thick.
And he was only 11 or 12.
He was 11. He was 11. We got his file and we were like, yeah, this is it. This is the one. And I still have no doubt that we made the decision that, we were supposed to make, but it
But the ride was rocky.
it is not for the faint of heart. I'm telling you. Yeah, it is a calling. It is a calling, absolutely, every bit as much as if you said, well, I'm going to go be a missionary in Africa, and take all my kids and this is what we're going to do. I mean, it's that much of an upheaval of your life. The only difference is there it doesn't end. You don't come home from
From the mission.
from the mission
Yeah.
field. Yeah, you never come home from it. You stay on this mission field for the rest of your life. So, yeah, it is definitely a calling, and it was a journey we weren't ready for. I say we weren't ready. We didn't really, when we realized what we had gotten into, we didn't feel like we were ready, but I do know that the Lord had equipped us for it, and that we were where we were supposed to be when we were supposed to be there. And Douglas was meant to be in our family, but he ended up going to jail. I'm sure you read in the book about some of what we went through. He went to jail several times and for long periods of time, long stretches of every Sunday, my family was walking through metal detectors, being searched, having, my baby at the time, having her diaper searched to go through metal detectors. It was humiliating and it felt very hopeless for a while. But the silver lining in that is that um, our relationship with Douglas had been very tumultuous up until the point when he first went to jail when he was 16. And he was in jail that first stretch of time from 16 to 18. And during that time, the Lord used that because we were all he had. I mean, we were it.
98% of people in your position, you and your husband's position, would have left him.
I'm telling you, the Lord just worked in our hearts and in Douglas's, and we were so knit together, so close that we came out of that better
You couldn't
than.
have walked away, is what you're
Oh
saying.
no, absolutely not. We were 100% in. And Douglas, like I said, he needed us. He desperately, for the first time in his life, he really did. He has reactive attachment disorder, which is the kiss of death in the adoption world. Of all that he came to us with a list of, I don't know, so many diagnoses. I couldn't even recount them all to you right now. A lot. But at the top of that list, the most serious that a psychiatrist made us sign off on and say, you understand what you're getting yourself into, they basically deemed him unadoptable. And
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 this is not just one doctor
oh,
saying
no,
that.
no,
This
no. This
is
was a team. We sat around the table with a team of specialists and people that had been that had known Douglas for a while, including previous foster parents, and they all almost unanimously said that he was unadoptable and that he would spend his whole life institutionalized. That's what, was in store for him, that's what his life would be.
I imagine that broke your heart.
It did. It really broke my heart. It did not frighten me at the time, though, and I do know that that was a God thing, and that there was no fear, like, what are we doing? Why are we here? These people obviously know something that we don't know. We didn't feel afraid. Now, when things really started to get very difficult with him, and especially when everything came down to, like, we were in court and spending, thousands upon thousands of dollars trying to get his case moved from um, uh, adult court to juvenile court so that he wouldn't spend, 40 years in prison. Um, I did kind of flash back to those that sitting around that table and hearing about how he was going to be institutionalized for the rest of his life. It it was very daunting.
Plus, you had younger kids.
Yes, and it was terrible. It was a terrifying time. But all that to say, he did, and he continued to struggle and struggle and struggle. He went back to jail a couple of more times, and after he got out, but now, and I wish I could tell you, like, it's all like this big fairy tale. Everything in the end was all perfect and worked out so great. He struggles. He does. I mean, when you start life the way that he started life, some people do, really. You hear these people, they're kind of an enigma. They just, they rise above it all, and they're just like somehow just stronger and better for it. And they go out and do amazing things
That
with their life.
that's what it says in the book, or that's what it is in the movie. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's still some struggle that you don't see.
Yeah, but it just is. I know we know a lot of people that have adopted kids, even, not just these domestic adoptions like later in life, but kids, babies from Russia or China. And they end up dealing with the same things that we're dealing with. Because when a baby is neglected, abused, or neglected, early in life, in those first stages, when in that first stage of life, all those, like, neurons, or this is very technical here, so pay attention. Those neurons are firing and making those connections. That's a time where you're supposed to be learning things, like learning about the world. But if your whole world is nothing but survival, and you're alone in the world, you're abused or you're neglected, you're left, for hours and hours at a time. You don't know where your next meal is going to come from or where you're going to be tomorrow. Um, it damages your brain.
And your development is horribly affected.
Yes, 100%. There's developmental delays, there's brain damage. So yeah, you can go read more about that another time. But anyway, so that's what we were dealing with Douglas, and that's what Douglas deals with in his life. I mean, it's an uphill battle for him.
If well, no, I was going to ask a question that I'll ask you after we record. It's a bit of an unfair question to ask when we're recording, but I will ask you
Okay.
afterwards. Um, I'm going to weirdly pivot to the cover of your book.
Okay.
Did you pick that?
I did, in conjunction with my publisher, who we went back and forth. I think I I really fought for that cover because to me, it was the perfect image to portray this extended metaphor of brokenness. And so for those that haven't seen the book, the cover is like a woman's face that appears to be like covered in clay, or she's made of clay, and it's cracked. It's cracks all over her
Like
face.
I would imagine Humpty Dumpty when he came
Yes,
back to life.
cracked all over.
Yeah.
And all the cracks are filled with gold. And so it's a very striking image. And it really fits well with the metaphor that I open with, talking about kintsugi art, which, if your people aren't familiar with that, it's a type of art in Japanese art that kind of fits with their philosophy of wabi sabi, which both of those, kintsugi is like when something is broken, let's say a piece of pottery, and then instead of throwing it away, they put it back together with gold, and they use real gold. And so when it sets back, and it not only is it beautiful, it's striking pottery, striking art, but it's stronger.
And stronger, which is amazing, and it's precious.
Yes.
It's more precious, not just because gold has been added to it, but because it's been put back together, and it
Yes.
becomes better in lots of
Yes.
different ways.
Indeed. So
And that's meant to be a metaphor for you.
it's the
you.
metaphor for, I think, all of our lives, that, I think that is the truth. There is not a single person who goes through life unscathed or untouched by trauma or grief, loss. I mean, we all grieve, we all lose something, we all well, I mean, even if it's a career or a dream, some people have physical injuries or illness that limits their ability to do the things that they thought they were going to be able to do. I mean, there's just a million different ways people are traumatized, people grieve losses in their lives. And what I talk about in the book is that, like kintsugi art, when we go through those things, we are broken, we're put back together, we are better in so many ways. We're stronger because those are the experiences that they really make us who we are. And they build our character. They strengthen our relationships with people. So yeah, I loved the image when I saw it, and I did fight for that. I really wanted that. I'm working on my second book right now, and I have a very specific metaphor, that I'm using, and a very clear image in my mind of what that cover needs to look like. So I'm in that process right now.
We're about 37 minutes in. Have we said the name of the book yet?
Oh my goodness, I don't
I don't
know.
know
I
that
think so.
I don't know that we have, and shame on me for not saying it.
Okay,
I
yeah,
think you should.
it's on you.
No, no, it is on me, but you should say the name of the book since you wrote it.
Okay, well, it's Our Lives in Pieces, and the subtitle is a collection of flash memoir essays. And for people that don't normally, they're not like literary types. Really, flash it's a form of writing that is not only very short and concise, but it's different from like a short story in that it it has a real, like, it has the same, like, the narrative arc that any type of story would have, but you start right where the action starts. I mean, you're right in the middle. You don't There's no backstory in the beginning. That first line is generally like, you're right in it. You are in the midst of the
Like
action.
the crescendo is starting in a serious
Yeah,
way.
you're right, and you're thrown right into it, and it's a little, exhilarating, maybe disorienting at first, because you're kind of like, what? What are we talking about?
The
Like,
first
what?
two or three essays, I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah, what is happening? What is happening here? And slowly the tension builds, and then you begin to understand, oh, you get a sense of the characters, you get a sense of the setting, where we are, what's happening. And there's that same thing like with any story where you're like, I don't know where this is going, but I'm here for it. And another difference with Flash form is that it's not necessarily resolved in the end. It's like there is not necessarily going to be like I'm telling you now exactly everything that happened here. Everything you just read is all wrapped up in a neat little bow. It leaves a lot for the reader to do some work, to use their own mind, their own brain, their own imagination, and yeah, so it's different. I did really like the kintsugi metaphor implies. I did try to infuse hope in all of the stories, even though the topics sometimes are very, very heavy. Um, and I have been told by people reading the book that, wow, Oh, that first section, that was a lot. Yeah, like I've heard a lot of people telling me, wow, I cried a lot.
You don't feel hope, or you don't realize you're feeling hope in the
Right.
beginning.
Right.
As you go through it, you look back and you're like, okay, there's
Yes.
that connective tissue throughout, and your experiences are the connective tissue that go through that. But it is like a short story in that, hey, this next section is not going to be necessarily connected based on a storyline from the last section you just read.
Yes. Yeah. It really is little bits and pieces. I mean, it's called Our Lives in Pieces. And that really is the idea that it's just bits and pieces, fragments of a life. And we do all have those fragments in our life. Everybody does.
We all experience challenges and trauma at various levels.
Hmm.
I would say I've talked to a lot of people in my life. You've experienced more trauma than the average bear for sure. I say that just as an observation. I'm not meant to feel sorry for you, even though my heart does go out to you for feeling that. But I think you've gotten to a really good place that you're able to write an entire piece that talks about a lot of things that most people haven't experienced, and the ones that have, most are not willing to talk about it.
Yeah.
So
It's, like I said, it is cathartic. It definitely is. And yeah, not everybody can and not everybody should write all of that for the world to see. But I do recommend, writing at least for yourself some of the things that are the hardest things to remember, the things that are hard to talk about, those things that haunt you. It is very freeing when you write it down and you have that feeling of this is as bad as it gets. This is the worst thing that can happen. This is it. Right now I'm dealing with the worst of it because I am, remembering, reliving this experience. I there it doesn't get worse than this. I mean, this is it. This is the hard part. And so then when you're on the other side of it, your brain really kind of experiences it completely different. There's research that says that with trauma, the more you write about it, express it, your brain kind of almost becomes bored with it.
mm,
You know how you know, we all have that family member that tells the same story every time.
my kids tell me that I'm that guy.
Yeah, we when we get older, we all become that guy. Honestly, that's part of getting older. But you know what? They can suck it up and
Right, deal
they'll
with
have
it.
their turn,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, but and we can laugh about that. Like, yeah, yeah, mom, yeah, yeah, dad, I've heard this a million times. I've heard that story. Like, I'm bored with that. But it's true that your brain does get bored with stories that it hears and relives so many times. And that's a good thing.
Does that mean the brain is healthier?
I definitely think it is. Yeah. You're not looking in the rear view mirror. You're like, yeah, yeah, that's behind me. And now I'm looking ahead.
The brain being bored allows you to live in the
Hmm.
moment and
Yeah, I think
move
so.
forward. Yeah, that's really cool. There's so many other parts. By the way, when you said Flash, it really hit me differently just now because I'm going through the book, and I think your longest section maybe 4.5 pages, maybe
Hmm.
five,
Yeah.
and your shortest is half a page,
Yeah.
not even half a page.
Right.
Yeah, and so when you say Flash, you're not kidding.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's a whole different literary form that a lot of people aren't, um, if they're not immersed in the literary world, they may not be used to that sort of thing. Some people, they're familiar with like a short story, but short stories can be, very, very long.
25 pages.
Yes,
Yeah.
they can be. And they read different. They read like a mini, um, like a miniature novel or a miniature, like a novella, in miniature. And Flash doesn't work like that. Like I said, you arrive late and you leave early. That's what we say about Flash. You get in there, you're right in the middle of it, and then you get out, and then it's up to the reader to decide what just happened here. What
What
did I read?
have you read On Writing from Stephen King?
Yes.
So any writer I think has probably read that, or anyone that's serious about writing.
Hmm.
I've read it. I'm not a writer, at least not yet. Maybe there's hope for me. But I think what he describes in On Writing is this idea of this idea, a place to begin, and it's usually pretty wild, a lot to take in, and then he builds a story around that. Is how he writes a lot of his short stories
Right.
and longer form novels, which is pretty wild. Maybe what he's been doing is flash essays and then building from there.
Yeah, I mean, and everybody has their own approach to writing for sure, and there plenty has been said about writing. I mean, there there's no end. I have a library of I don't even know how many hundreds and hundreds of books in my office, and probably a fourth of them are books about writing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I read a lot of them.
Yeah, I've heard that if you want to be a good writer, you need to be a good reader.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
All right,
Mhm.
this next part of your life, I don't know that I want to bring it up, and I'm going to bring it up anyway. And if you say, "Yeah, I don't want to talk about it," but a loss of a child, I cannot imagine the loss of a child.
Yeah, well, I know. And I'm glad we're revisiting this because I'm like, I need to make sure I get that straight before we get off the air. The book, the loss that I talk about, well, I talk about a lot of different loss of a lot of different people, but what I open with, the loss of a child, is that's my nephew, not
You're
my
using air
child.
quotes, and so I
Yeah,
got you.
again, he's not a child either. He's, at that point it was he died right before his 31st birthday. And so, yeah, I talk a lot about my nephew in there, about losing him. I also worked for hospice, so I talk about, losing patients and what that was like for me and for them and for the families. Um,
I'm
I,
laughing at myself a little bit because my English teachers from high school, if they do listen to this, they'll realize my reading comprehension was not great.
No, that's okay. I can understand why you thought that. I mean, it makes sense. Really, if you read, and I never, some authors will write like at the top, of the beginning of a story or an essay or something, or at the end, author's note, and then they tell you everything, all the backstory that they didn't tell in the story.
Yeah, what's the point of
And
that?
it's like, yeah, but I just don't really want you to tell me all that because, why you were thinking this and what went into that and what this is really about. It's kind of like with poetry, you don't want a poet to sit there or songwriter, to tell you,
Here, the poem notes to the side, all the things he
yeah,
was
like
thinking
this is everything it means. This is what it's all about. The beauty of it is you use your own imagination and you think, wow, this is what I wonder what's happening here. And the reality is the more ambiguous it is, or obscure, then the more universal it is. It's everybody's story.
and more interpretations of beauty.
Yes, yeah. I mean, if you've ever lost anybody, then this story's for you.
So you've been sober since November, which is amazing, and I can see it on your face. It's a struggle.
Yeah.
Um, and look, we've all had, well, I say all, most people have struggled with substances of some sort, whether they're prescribed or not, or you have to go to a liquor store or go to your dealer or whatever. When did you know you were an addict?
Whew, well, very early on, when I was in college, I was addicted to, I mean, really just about everything. The addiction with uh, cocaine was by far the worst in those early years.
Did you have any idea what you were getting into?
No, no, I didn't. I really, I started off like most people do. And, these days, everybody and their brother smokes pot. And you can't drive down the road without it's smelling skunky smell.
Smell it everywhere.
Everywhere. It's everywhere. And it's become so normalized and everybody's like, yeah, it's just fine. And then, it's like you're like some old boomer for saying, it's a gateway drug, but it is.
Yeah,
We all know that it is. It just is, and that's true.
especially the stuff they're smoking now.
Oh
It's
yeah,
a lot harder.
exactly. And it is a gateway drug because once you've done that, basically once you've decided, and drink and alcohol too as well. Once you've decided, yeah, I'm gonna allow my state of consciousness to be altered in this way and just fearlessly go down this path of having these experiences with this with pot or with alcohol, you do open the door to other things. Now if you have a predisposition to be an addict, and how you don't know that until you start doing these things, then yeah, you're going to find yourself in real trouble pretty soon because while someone who doesn't have that predisposition might be able to just, go out and in their college days, go out and like get high and drink, drink a lot, over the weekend. And then, during the week, they might just be totally fine. I've never been totally fine with
Yeah.
anything. It's all or it's nothing. And so I first started with smoking pot and then, I think strangely, the next thing that I did, which was weird, but it was really acid. I went right to that.
That's a weird pivot.
It was, yeah,
Yeah.
but I was a deadhead. I followed the Grateful Dead all over the country
But
and
not a weird pivot for you.
not a
Yeah.
weird pivot for a deadhead. Exactly. And I was doing whippets, that was back in the day. I don't want to glorify, like you have somebody listening to this going, "Ooh, like what's that? I want to try that." Do not try this at
It
home.
kills
Yeah.
brain cells, a lot
It
of it.
does. It does fry your brain. Um, I did that. I started dropping acid, had acid dropped in my eyes, at shows. It's crazy stuff. And then,
Why the eyes?
you know, I didn't even question
Your
it at
kids
the
are all
time.
adults now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I didn't even question it at the time, which is the really terrifying part about, being an addict like that. It's like the things that you'll just do and not even think, like, wow, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. But it's kind of like it's a quicker way to get the drug into your system,
Okay.
is the bottom line. Yeah, it's kind of like doing sublingual, something under your tongue,
Yeah.
as opposed to chewing it or whatever. So yeah, it's a quick way to get the drug in there. And I did that for a long time. And then I like smoked peyote and did ecstasy,
So anything that you had access to.
literally anything, smoked crack. And then when I had this group that I was hanging around with, and it's one of the advantages of being a girl, and that they, were attracted to. Everything's free
Mhm.
for the girls. We don't pay. We didn't pay for drugs, and so yeah, it was an endless supply at these house parties, in college.
So
Of
you had the problem of access and no financial burden.
Yeah, I mean, not at all. It wasn't. I didn't even think about it. It's just like it was just there all the time. I'd walk in a room, somebody would just lay out, some lines of coke um and it was just always available for me. So I really got myself into trouble though. I got to the point where I just literally couldn't go, more than a few hours without doing it. And I mean, I've always been a functional addict. I mean, every single addiction, every obsession, every compulsion, I've been very functional.
You're up the next day and you're
Oh
doing what
yeah,
you need
I
to do.
mean, even that day, like, I mean, people for the most part would not know how out of control my life was. And the same thing with the eating disorder. I mean, nobody really, I mean, they could look at me, back then, I up until 4 years ago, I looked like someone who, was not eating much.
Yeah.
But in our culture, that's kind of celebrated, really people would say, "Oh my God, you look so great." I weigh 90 pounds. You look great. And I'm like,
Maybe not feeling great and maybe not
right.
great on the inside.
And another thing people don't realize with anorexia, when you're starving your body, that means you're starving your brains. Your brain is just not functioning well. I mean, it is a kind of fog that, unless you've experienced it, I just don't know that I can even really explain it. It's weird. You literally cannot like make decisions or understand things. It really hinders you cognitively.
Like you just can't focus.
You cannot. You cannot focus. And ironically, you literally never stop thinking about food.
Hmm.
Never. There's not 1 minute of your day you're not thinking about food. You just don't eat it, but you think about it 24/7.
That's torture.
Total. It's total torture. Yeah.
Wow, you mentioned a predisposition earlier to marijuana or alcohol being a gateway. Is that predisposition, both born out of your genetic code and some of your experiences in childhood, do you think?
I'm sure. I'm sure of it. I mean, I come from a family of addicts, and it wears many different masks. There are, there are many alcoholics. In my family growing up, I was exposed to that from the beginning, and I talk a little about that in the book too. My grandmother, who on my father's mother, who I just loved her so much. I loved all my grandparents, but she was just especially, dear to me. And she was an alcoholic and ended up committing suicide
Mm.
when I was 19.
As a grandmother.
Yes,
Wow.
yes, yeah. She laid down on a train track,
Oh,
and they said her blood alcohol level was toxic. So,
basically, she might have died from alcohol poisoning.
well, I mean, I hate to even talk about it, remember it, but I mean, it's in the book, you'll read it. But um, the conductor of the train said that she raised her head and she looked at him. So
Mm.
she wasn't
Completely.
out of it on that
Yeah.
train track. She knew what she was doing, or I don't know. I assume. But anyway, and then my mother's, so that's on my father's side, and then my mother's father was a raging alcoholic. And I'm not sure if in this book I talk about that, but it's definitely in my next book. I have some pieces in there about that. And so, that was my life. I mean, growing up, being around these grandparents that were, alcoholics. My mother um, was not a drinker. In fact, I don't know that she's ever had a drink in her life.
Mm.
So she's, what they call a dry drunk, really, though, because she's just completely abstinent, like not going to drink that. But she has all those same personality
Yeah.
traits. It's all that she has that kind of personality. So, the eating disorder is rampant in my family. I mean, you're hard pressed to find somebody in my family that isn't at least have disordered eating all the way up to full blown eating disorders. So many of us. So yeah, it's very much a genetic thing, and yeah, the early trauma in my life definitely pulled the trigger.
Yeah, had to. You mentioned a second book. Is the second book going to take the same format and style?
Yeah, I'm doing that one. It's going to be a collection of essays as well. It's called Not Finished Yet.
Mm, okay.
And it is there's
That's hopeful.
yes, it is
Yeah.
very hopeful, lots of hope. These pieces in this book are not nearly as heavy or dark. I mean, it still touches on, some of the same things, but um so I'm using the metaphor of metamorphosis, like a jellyfish,
Mm.
the jellyfish's life cycle and metamorphosis, the way that they begin as a polyp and then go through the stages all the way around to the Medusa stage and then start over again. They can reverse or actually become themselves over and over
The
again.
caterpillar to butterfly doesn't reverse.
No, and I thought about I thought about using that. I was going to in the beginning. I thought, but first of all, it's just so typical. Like when you hear about metamorphosis, you just think of a butterfly, and it's so easy. I mean, it's easy. Right now I could just start firing off a million really great ideas for literary pieces using those metaphors. But um the jellyfish is fascinating when you start looking into what the life is like, and there's so many different types of them, and some of them have different some added stages in their metamorphosis. It is truly fascinating, and I felt like it was such a good metaphor for a book about how we are just all always becoming. We are never arriving at the only version of ourselves, like this is it, this is who I am. There's always going to be, like, tomorrow you will be somebody different. I'll be different tomorrow because I sat down and spent this time with you.
Sure. You
um
both will be. Yeah.
yeah, and so we everything, good, bad, and ugly that happens in our life, is like the tides that move that jellyfish along. The temperature of the water determines how fast, it's growing, and the blooms, that happens. So anyway, so I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty far into that book. I've
Nice.
got I've got the first draft done, and a lot of the editing on some of the pieces, and like I said, working on the cover now. So I'm hoping by the end of this year I'll be ready to release that.
How many people read this book that we're talking about tonight, and how many people will read the other one?
Um, you know,
I mean, before you publish. Sorry, I should
oh,
clarify.
before
Yeah,
before I
yeah.
published it, probably 3 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that doesn't seem like a lot of people to read?
No, no. Well, and I say three that read the entire manuscript, the editor, and some beta readers. But normally, but also with this, because it's essays, and a lot of the essays have been published in magazines previously before I put them in this book form. So all those pieces that were previously published, they've been read by a lot of people, sometimes, hundreds of people, including, an entire editorial team, all the other people that read that magazine, people in workshops that I've been in that have workshopped the pieces with me and given me feedback on it. So they've been through a lot of
I
hands.
was gonna say you're getting feedback from everybody except for the casual reader of the essay in a magazine in
Right,
similar
right.
settings.
Yeah.
All right. I have two quick things. One quick and one not so quick. We're probably an hour and a half drive away from a jellyfish right now because we're in that part of the world that
Yes.
they're going to be in like no,
Yes.
even closer to probably some jellyfish in the James River. We may be 30 minutes away right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah. You're not going to find that out in like Missouri, as an example.
Yes.
That's my short, silly thing. I just felt like saying that.
Thanks for sharing.
It's that time of year too, by the way. And by the way, I appreciate your sarcasm because I haven't shown my full sarcasm yet. And I don't think you have either. Um, you've lived in Hanover County a lot of your life. And you've experienced trauma living in Hanover County. What is it about Hanover that brings you back?
Well,
What keeps you here?
uh, there's a really short answer to that, but
Give me a short answer, then a slightly longer answer.
I'll give you the short and the longer version. When I was in high school, and was living in Western Hanover County, went to Patrick Henry. Um, I was a foreign exchange student.
Oh my gosh, we
Yeah.
talked about this and I
Yes.
forgot to bring
Yeah.
it up.
Yeah. So I was a foreign exchange
Oh,
student.
I'm so happy that we brought this up.
And I lived in New Zealand for the whole last part of my high school days. So the last half of my junior year and most of my senior year, I actually graduated over there in New Zealand.
You're a Kiwi graduate of
I
high
am a
school.
Kiwi graduate. Yes, I told you when we talked that I also was the first I had the honor of being the first American to ever pass what's called the university entrance exam, and I was invited to come to university there. It's a socialist country, so college, they pay for college. We won't get into all that. It's not free because trust me,
But
they pay for
for
it.
the Americans listening, Brits, Australians, and Kiwis, I think all have to take some sort of entrance exam to get into college,
Yes, yes.
or what they call
And it
university.
was a difficult exam. I studied for the last couple of months that I was there. I studied for that exam, and it was quite grueling. But and I took it just because I just wanted to do it. I wanted to know what it was like. I didn't have to do that, I didn't have to spend my time doing studying and taking those exams, but I just wanted to know, I challenged myself, and it was a pretty awesome accomplishment. I felt really good about it when I got the letter saying, that you can feel, we invite you to come back, to go to university in Wellington, and which is the southern part of the North Island. So anyway, I chose not to, though, and this is why. So back to your question of why did I stay in Hanover? Um, it was so hard to leave New Zealand. I did not want to leave. By then, I mean, you know, I was one of them,
You
and
felt like a Kiwi.
I
Yeah.
definitely did. I did the haka, come mate, come mate,
It's a trance.
come mate, come mate. Yeah, I knew it. I did it. I mean, I was one of them. And I didn't want to leave. I was just, it's kind of like when a kid goes to a sleepover, and you go to pick them up and they're like, Mom, Dad, do I have to leave? I didn't want to leave. I was just having, a wonderful life there. Um, I cried and cried and cried. It was so difficult to leave. But then when I came home, I don't know, it just, everything changed. I was like, wow. I mean, I was so grateful for that experience and I will never forget it. But I, then I just felt like I don't want to. I want to stay close to home. I just want to be around my people, And so then when I came home, the my friends at Patrick Henry, they were still in school. I was done, but I would kind of drift in and out of classrooms just for the heck of it to go, bug people. And I was always a class clown, and
You wanted to be around people.
yeah, I just wanted to go be with them. So I hung out for a while, and a lot of them I still, I was kind of hanging out with them on the weekends and stuff. But then they were all like, they couldn't wait. They had been in Hanover their whole life and they were like, couldn't wait to get out of this hillbilly town, They're like, I just can't wait. The funny thing about that is they went to places like JMU and Ferrum, and stuff. And I'm like,
Slightly different version of Hanover County.
just a different kind of hillbilly town. I'm pretty sure they still have 8-inch lift kits on their truck, and at their gun rack.
Yeah, we have a different zip code here, but that's about the only
Yeah.
difference.
But they just couldn't wait to get away. They, you know how it is when you're, young like that, you just that ache to be independent, to make your own way. And so I understood that, but I didn't want to do that. So I stayed. I didn't live in my parents' house. I did get an apartment, but I stayed close and I went to VCU, and I just really kind of put down roots and was like, this is what I'm going to do. I want to stay here. And I I love Hanover. I live out in the country in Hanover too, like I said, God's country.
Well, hold on. Besides 360 and the town of Ashland, that's what the county is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, no, no, that's fine. But I mean, we live out in the middle of a lot of farmland. We have a little farm, and I homeschooled my kids there for 25 years. We milked a cow. We had a cow share program selling our
Kids were in
milk.
nature for school.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they had the best education ever.
Ever.
We grew our food. They learned how to preserve it, can, things. My tomatoes are quite famous.
Really?
Yes, yes. I put up a
In
lot
in
of
tomato
tomatoes.
form or like a pasta form or a
All
salsa
of
form?
all of that.
All of it.
Yes, yeah. And I am
Did,
quite known for my salsa. Too.
did I hear you offer a couple of tomatoes?
I will bring you tomatoes and I will bring you salsa. I've got peppers right now and cucumbers coming out of my ears, but no tomatoes that are ready. July 4th is, what we
Yeah,
aim
sure.
for in the tomato world. But and then it's all the tomato sandwiches you can eat, which is
Mm.
what I live for. So
Yeah, tomato sandwiches is a thing, especially around
so
here.
good, so
Yeah.
good. And with Duke's mayonnaise, only Duke's. You can't, don't make that face. If you are
No,
using,
you're
okay.
misinterpreting my face. I'm thinking back, like, when we were kids, was there any other kind of mayonnaise besides Duke's?
If there was, it was some kind of sacrilegious, blasphemous thing that
I
was
can't name one.
happening.
I
I
can't name
know, And when I go to somebody's house and there's Hellman's mayonnaise or something, I'm like, who are you?
one. You must not be from around here.
You are not my people.
Oh, that's funny.
Hmm.
All right, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna have you back a second time because we definitely did not give your New Zealand experience enough, and then we'll talk about your book when it comes out.
Okay, yeah, great. That would
Does
be
that sound good?
Yeah, and I appreciate this was fun.
I'm glad you had fun because if you didn't, it's all on me.
That's right. It'd be your fault.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.